UCLA Bruins are slated to have their first spring game under new head football coach Jim Mora Jr. this Saturday at the Rose Bowl. And to help preview the big game Saturday at the Rose Bowl and kind of recap spring practices to this point is Matt Stevens. He's the former UCLA quarterback in 1985 and 1986. He won the Rose Bowl by defeating Iowa in 1986, 45-28. He is actually the current color analyst on the UCLA Football Network. I'm Dan Harrelson alongside Nick Taylor, and let's preview spring practice under first-year head football coach for the Bruins, Jim Mora Jr. Matt, how are you doing this morning?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I always love Tuscaloosa. That's where my former offensive coordinator, Homer Smith, was from. And unfortunately, he died last year, but what a great man.
Oh, yeah, Homer Smith is a household name around these parts.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being with us again this morning, Matt. I guess we'll start off by saying, obviously, it was kind of a whirlwind for the Bruins last year. They made it to the Pac-12 championship game, albeit under very bizarre circumstances. And then, of course, they brought in a guy who's not been a head coach at the collegiate level, but who obviously has a name and has very strong connections to the UCLA and Los Angeles area in particular, and obviously with the NFL name. Talk about how he's been able to kind of put a unique stamp on the program and how the fan base feels like the direction the program is heading. Well, there's a lot of fans, a lot of alumni, and myself just watching the practice think that Jim Mora is going to have the same impact that Pete Carroll had going to USC, coming from the pro ranks and then coaching in college. Jim Mora is bringing a real up-tempo type practice all through spring for the UCLA football players, where it's run at that NFL level. You can see them practicing game situations throughout the entire practice. The guys are really buying into it. And Jim Mora has went out and hired some of the best assistant coaches he could find across the country. And a lot of those coaches have ties to Southern California, and they're great recruiters. One guy, Adrian Clem, he's a former NFL lineman, Super Bowl champ with the NFL with the Patriots. And he comes in with loads of experience only as a player, but he's from Southern California, so he's one of the best recruiters in the country. It really helped the recruiting class when Jim Mora came on board with these assistant coaches, and Jim Mora had these players believing and practicing at a tempo that I've never seen UCLA practice at in the last decade.
Well, you bring up the coaching staff. One guy that strikes me as a great hire is Noel Mazzoni, the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for the Bruins this season. Of course, in the South, we know him from his days at NC State, Ole Miss, and Auburn. Talk about the offense that he will run and that he is installing right now during spring and going into fall camp.
Well, I was able to see Noel Mazzoni's offense firsthand when he was at Arizona State last year. He likes to spread a team out and on the right side of the field, put a bubble of receivers, and then put what they call an F-back or an F in motion, and he makes it real easy for the quarterback to count defenders. And if a defender or the defense sort of commits trying to stop the bubble screen and F-back going to the outside, he'll pound the ball up the middle with a big running back. It's a very simplistic offense. And I'm pretty surprised, we're into the fourth week of spring practice, and all the quarterbacks, all the players on offense seem to have already a handle on what Noel Mazzoni's trying to accomplish. And he's a real good motivator and a great quarterback coach. A lot of times when UCLA's not practicing, we'll see Tim Tebow, other NFL quarterbacks out on Spalding Field, the UCLA practice field, working with Noel Mazzoni. So he not only is a great offensive innovator, but he's really renowned in terms of coaching quarterbacks, not only in college, the NFL ranks. That's very interesting. Well, forgive me for the next question, man, but we can't talk about UCLA without bringing up your Fall City rivals, if you will. for a long period of time. So he's one of the few defensive minds in the Pac-12. Most of the guys, you look at Rich Rodriguez, Lane Kiffin, Sarkisian up in Washington State, Michael Leach, the new hire, of course, at Washington State. These guys are all offensive minds. So I think Jim Moore is going to bring a real toughness and defensive mind to this UCLA football team and the Pac-12. So it's going to be something different. It's coming to the Pac-12 team. In terms of the rivalry, obviously USC has dominated the past decade. They've had some great athletes. And under Lane Kiffin, they've done a good job under the sanctions that USC has been under in terms of not winning bowl games, the lack of scholarships. But you look at this UCLA football team, it's just like they've had a boost in the arm by Jim Moore. I mean, they're just better conditioned. They seem like they're better coached. They're better motivated. They're going to be better prepared. You think that Jim Moore is going to be able to close this gap. And one thing about Rick Neuheisel, obviously he didn't have success at UCLA. He did not beat the coverage bear for Jim Moore. There's a lot of talent on that UCLA football team, bolstered by a great recruiting class. So Jim Moore is not going to be starting from scratch, sort of where they said that Rick Neuheisel started 4 years ago. So Jim Moore has a good pool of talent, great coaches. I think he's going to be able to close that gap pretty early on Lane Kiffin.
Well, Matt, let's talk about the 2012 schedule. Do you like playing the 3 non-conference games right off the bat? Of course, at Rice, Nebraska at home, and Houston in the Rose Bowl. And then you have the rest of the way 9 conference games. Do you like that schedule?
Well, it's really in favor of UCLA. I mean, obviously, you would expect UCLA to beat Rice on a Thursday night, even though it's an away game. And then having to play Nebraska, that's going to be the tough non-conference team for UCLA. But it's going to be at the Rose Bowl, a marquee game. I'm sure on one of the major networks, you would think, UCLA is going to be able to show up and play against a very talented Taylor Martinez, the quarterback for the Cornhuskers. And then Houston, they've lost Case Keenum. They've lost their head coach. They're going to be in a rebuilding program, and that team is going to be at the Rose Bowl. So UCLA, I think, is going to be able to get off to a good start. Even if they're 2-1, I would consider that a good start for UCLA. And the other advantage for the schedule of UCLA is that they have 7 home games this year. And of the Pac-10 opponents that they do play, 2 of those opponents, Washington, Oregon, Washington, who has really come under Sarkisian, and Oregon, obviously, has dominated the Pac-12. They do not play those 2 teams. So you would think the UCLA schedule is really in Jim Moore's favor. Well, talk about just the outlook of the conference in general. You mentioned the other coaches that came into the late Mike Leach and Rick Rodriguez in particular. What do you think the direction is for the Pac-12? Obviously, Chip Kelly decided to stay to Oregon after flirting with the NFL. It seems as though the Pac-12 is really sort of having a renaissance, and really doing what they had to do to compete with the top 3 with the SECs in the world. It seems like the Pac-12 is sort of reinventing itself, not only at USC and UCLA, but all throughout the conference. Do you think that's something that the athletic directors within the conference has actually decided to do as individuals, or do you think it's a conference-led type of movement to get those high-profile coaches into the Pac-12? Well, I mean, it really comes down to money. I mean, the Pac-12, the TV contract under Larry Scott, the Pac-12 commissioner, instead of schools being paid $6 million a year, they're now being paid $21 million a year from the TV contract. So you're able to lure guys like Mike Leach, Rich Rodriguez, who are prominent coaches nationally, into the Pac-12, and it's really going to bolster all of those programs. But looking at the Pac-12 and who's going to be the contenders, it's divided, of course, in the north and the south. You got to think of in the north and Oregon, even though they lost Darren Thomas, their quarterback, LaMichael James, their star running back, they're going to be able to reload with talent. They've been recruiting really well. Chip Kelly has that program on a roll. Washington will be another team, I think, under Nick the best receiver in Robert Wood and Marquise Lee are the guys that Matt Markey's going to be throwing to. So you're going to see Lane Kiffin putting the ball up and getting those two star receivers in space and letting them do their thing. Rich Rodriguez is in a rebuilding mode. Of course, Arizona State lost Dennis Erickson, so it's going to take some time. And then you have Utah, who's going to get Jordan Witt back at quarterback. It's really going to help them without last year with a shoulder separation. And then Colorado's in a rebuilding year. So it's not going to be the best year in terms of the Pac-12, but I think under the new guidance of these dynamic coaches that have been brought in, the Pac-12 is really going to improve in years to come. Man, I have one final question, unless you have something else. What I was wondering, we always get a preseason national championship game pick whoever we talk to, and I have Bama and USC playing in the title game. Unfortunately for UCLA fans out there, although I do think UCLA will be much improved and should actually, with the nucleus they have coming back, I do think the Bruins will be bowling this year, which will be a great accomplishment for first-year coach Jim Moore. But I do have Bama playing USC in the title game, and I'm kind of going back and forth on who I actually think will win. I mean, you would think it would be hard to beat Nick Saban, and Nick Saban had 30 days to prepare, but at the same time, this USC team may be an SEC caliber team as far as the roster is concerned. So I'm kind of waffling on the pick, so I would hold that and flip a coin if those two actually do play. But I do have Bama and USC. Who do you have at this point, Dan? You can look at Alabama. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say you have to put Bama and USC up there, and maybe an LSU or that type Oklahoma. But I agree with Nick. I like UCLA. I like the direction they're going. I think Jim Moore Jr. will get the Bruins turned around, and they definitely should be bowling this year. But what is your pick, Matt?
I like Alabama, of course. I mean, they have just a great talent pool, great recruiting class once again by Nick Saban. You have to think that program is on a roll, and I don't know what's going to stop it. I do like Michigan, of course, in the Big Ten. They get their star quarterback coming back, and Brady Hook's done a great job turning that program around in just 1 year. They won their bowl game last year. I don't see USC going to any national championship or even a BCS game. They have to get past Oregon. Oregon's the cream of the crop in the Pac-12. You also have to remember that USC lost some guys up front. Matt Khalil, that left tackle, he was a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. It's always great to have a great quarterback, great receivers, but you got to protect the quarterback. And they also lost the defensive end of Nick Perry, who was an early first-round draft pick as well. Oregon, I like Virginia Tech. They got a lot of guys coming back. And Michigan are those 3 teams that I think are going to play against Alabama in that national championship game.
Well, Matt, thank you for coming on 2 days before the 2012 UCLA spring game, and we would like to talk more with you with that throughout the season and check in on the UCLA Bruins this year.
Absolutely, and we'd like to meet we off the record added to some of our information, and thanks for coming on today. And by the way, a UCLA guy is never going to pick USC to be in a national championship game. You got to get that straight. I understand, but I know how it works.